I'm so glad you took notes because I didn't. I don't know why you're so surprised that you took pages and pages of notes when we watched 3 movies.
It was just, one movie, and it was 3, it's the length of a Lord of the Rings movie. Not even as long as an extended cut of Lord of the Rings. One movie.
It felt like it.
Fair. It's, wow, look at oh my God. Oh my, look at all this.
You're gonna need to get a new notebook.
This is a new notebook. I've actually gone through 3 notebooks.
I have gone through 3 notebooks, but only because I keep losing them and then having to grab a new notebook.
I feel
so then once I'm done, I found not my original. I did find my original. It's currently in my purse. But once I go through this one, I'll go back to the original. And then once I'm finished with the original, then I'll use the 3rd one.
That's the way to do it. That's like the only way to really do it. Yeah.
Because then eventually we'll have like all this archive of all of our notes when we upload them.
See, that's what I need to see. Because what I've done is I just haven't bought a new notebook. So all 3 of the notebooks I've gone through are like notebooks I used for like community college like years ago. So I just have like random math notes that I have to work around, like a couple pages.
No, all of mine were fresh because I have this problem where I can't stop buying notebooks.
I wish I had that problem.
With no intent of ever filling them.
Honestly, though, great. That's awesome.
Yeah.
I wish I want more. See, I went through that phase for a little while. And now I'm coasting off it from a few years later. I'm like, all right, old Caleb, you're helping me out. Thank you for coming back again to another episode of the Cynical Cinephiles, the podcast where I am dead inside. I am your host, Caleb, and this is the other host of this podcast that we are on, that I am on with this other host, and that other host's name is...
Caitlin!
Hey! Let's go!
The audio peaks.
Yeah, as it should. I hope your ears are feeling some good feelings today.
Don't listen to this podcast with earbuds.
Actually, please do. I hope that you're listening to our
I feel like our next episode should be entirely ASMR.
Honestly, that's going to be me today. I feel like my voice is naturally like shifting into those lower tones. So I'm kind of trying to make it work.
Okay. All right. Word.
It's my just depression, kicking in round 8, baby.
Is it because of the movie we watched?
Yeah, honestly, got me in the feels, man.
What did we watch today?
What did we watch today? I have to think back on that one. Well, luckily I can literally look back at the sign. Audio listeners, there is a sign that we put behind us that says the name of the movie. I don't know if you knew this.
Every single episode.
Yeah, if you've wondered what we were referring to when we said, hey, it's behind us, that's what was behind us. A sign with the name of the movie. Yeah. I know you're missing out. Kizumonogatari. A set of 3 films, sort of. There's part 1 and then there's part 2. And then there's part 3. They are all adapting one novel, one Japanese light novel, which is a prequel to the, Bakemonogatari trilogy and the whole Monogatari series at large, basically. Whole thing. But Caitlin doesn't know anything about that. She watched it in a vacuum, in a bottle, etc. And that's the movie we're talking about because it was in fact designed to be either watched as a prequel or on its own. So that's, or as like, I guess, an initial thing. Anyway, Caitlin, you should probably synopsize because I'm going to keep talking if you don't. I'm sorry.
Oh God, why did you do this to me?
I'm sorry.
Okay, so the story opens with Araragi, who is a high school junior. He meets this girl named Hanekawa, who is very interested in vampires. And in talking to her, he tempts fate just enough to meet this lord vampire-ish named Kiss Shot.
And a bunch of other words, but they don't matter. They're too hard. There's a long-ass name.
Yeah, she has a very long name. And when he meets her, she is dying. She asks him if she can feast on him in order to regain some of her strength. For some fucking reason, he agrees to it.
He's like, nah, but maybe.
He becomes a vampire, and he's essentially her thrall. And she tasks him as her minion to recover some of her lost limbs, because when he finds her, she doesn't have any arms or legs, and when she feasts on him, she turns into a little girl. And so he has to go and find the 3 bad guys who took each of her limbs. And that's essentially the plot of most of it.
Yeah, that's the premise.
That's
that was
the
good.
premise.
Good coverage,
Oh my
honestly.
God.
Yeah, there was a couple takes out there that may have been cut, but generally
We're a one-take podcast.
this is
We
a
don't
one.
cut
We've never
anything.
made an edit in our life. So I was at the dentist the other day. Yeah, but I thought that was actually
Can
not a
I
bad
just
synopsis.
preface this by saying I don't know what I did to you. Is this payback for UHF? Like, I don't know what I did to you to make you choose this for the podcast.
Can I preface this by saying I'm sorry.
Because here's the thing.
Yeah.
This isn't just, we're not the only ones going to be listening to this, right?
Yes.
Hopefully, a lot of people are going to listen to this.
Yeah.
And I will say that me personally, I don't love anime as a medium for storytelling. I understand why people do. I get it. I have nothing but respect for people who love anime. I am not that guy. I'm not that guy, Chief.
Your boyfriend is quaking in his boots right
he's
now.
quaking.
Trembling.
So glasses are coming off.
Oof.
So in doing this and making me watch this, you're automatically setting me up to marginalize a community because of my
country.
because of my personal preference of not liking anime and all of my views about this.
Yeah.
I'm going to try really hard to not let the fact that I just don't like anime to cloud my feelings about this. But I do feel like if you know how I was like really afraid of getting canceled?
Yeah.
Like this is the episode where like I'm gonna get canceled. You know what I mean?
It's wait, don't worry. I'm there at the edit board waiting to see every racist thing she says.
It has nothing to do with the God, I fucking hate you. It has nothing to do with the people of Japan or the art medium as a whole. In fact, I like manga. Watching anime is not for me.
I mean, it's a little general, but fair enough. I do think preferences do exist to a certain degree. So, I mean, not to a certain, just preferences exist. I phrased that a little while.
I was going to say.
To a certain degree, but know your limits, woman. Don't worry, I'll get canceled first. I'll take the blow. No. But I do think preferences exist. But I also think, mediums can always surprise us.
Yeah, I have not had... we had this conversation before the movie started that I've been interested in getting into anime. Because,
I ruined it.
Yeah. Yes, you did. Single-handedly. I consider myself to be quite a nerd, a geek, whatever. I like a lot of different pop culture things.
Yeah.
And I feel like anime is like the one form of pop culture that I haven't.
Like your last Infinity Stone.
It's my final.
Have them all.
Yeah, it's like the final frontier of pop culture that I have not
embarked upon.
Yes.
Glanced at.
I have watched JoJo's Bizarre Adventure.
Peak. Also.
And not all of it. I've seen like maybe 3 episodes.
You've watched more than that.
Have I?
According to Toby. I mean, I don't know. Yeah, he's always like, yeah, I know. Caitlin's always sitting there watching me. She's like, yo, I love this shit. I assume always was like a good amount of episodes. But
I've seen a couple.
Okay, fair enough. We stand though.
Yeah, and I like it because I feel like it falls into this like campy, over the top kind of thing.
Oh yeah.
Whereas I also, and I'm gonna expose myself here, even though you say that I shouldn't. I have a really hard time with subbed anime.
Oh yeah.
I prefer dubbed anime if I'm to watch something because I have a hard time paying attention.
No, that's fair.
And when I'm watching TV, I want to be doing something else as well.
Yeah. I mean that is understandable. See, I'm not actually like a huge like you must watch everything subtitled. Like I'm like literally I'm not. I'm very like it's a show by show, movie by movie basis for me.
That's fair.
Yeah.
I would also say, did we come to the consensus that Avatar is anime?
Avatar is a Western show heavily inspired by anime.
Because I fucking love Avatar.
We stand Avatar. I mean, it's literally it's anime made by Americans, basically.
Yeah.
Like it's in everything but name.
Okay.
Yeah. So I mean, I would say so. I mean, so you get your one win.
Yeah.
I mean, did you like Your Name? I can't recall.
Yes,
Okay.
I did like Your Name.
A regular amount.
Yeah.
Yeah. Fair.
But it was like it's really hard because my main issue. Maybe I shouldn't. Maybe we should just leave it at that. My main issue with anime is that I feel like everything is just so fucking dramatic. And that's not something that captivates me, and it doesn't allow me to suspend my disbelief enough to be able to enjoy it as to the extent that other people do.
I mean, I do get that, and I think we briefly conversed a bit about that earlier today. And for me, I do get that with certain series. That's one of the main reasons, like the shonen demographic, which I should probably be converting lingo for people who don't watch anime because we haven't established this as like a thread of the podcast yet, so I can't assume people know any of this shit.
Right.
Shonen is just usually anime aimed at young boys, sort of. So that's gonna, your Naruto, your Dragon Ball, your One Piece, your Black Clover, your other shows. I do like some. Like, I mean, One Piece I do really like. Still, isn't like a beloved series to me, just because in general the shonen format doesn't work for me. One, because of that, it's so exaggerated, which sometimes can work in isolated moments, but sometimes I'm just like, okay, I'm sick. And also they're just very heavily on fighting, and if fighting is just like fighting for the sake of fighting, I just fucking get bored as shit. Oh yeah.
But that was also my issue with this, is I felt like it was incredibly dramatic, because we were talking about how the novel is has a lot to do with inner monologue, and that it's all shown through inner monologue, but that the movie doesn't show that.
Yeah,
I would disagree.
Well, I think it visually shows the inner monologue. That's what it does.
And through like noises and stuff, it kind of shows the inner monologue.
Yeah, it doesn't have him talking, but it does its best to show it all.
Yeah. And I got bored by that very easily. I will say that visually, this movie is stunning.
It's honestly one of the most gorgeous anime things ever, I think.
Rivaled only to Your Name.
True. I think
Your
they're
Name was visually incredible.
Makoto Shinkai, my king. Getting a new movie in a few months. It's great. I think they're beautiful in very different ways, though.
For sure.
Yeah. Makoto Shinkai has just like got a fucking hard on for skies. Yeah. And he like literally every poster of the last every movie he's ever made is like half sky. Like homie really likes his skies. Whereas this movie is more like experimental and blood and whack shit.
Yeah.
The studio who made it is Studio Shaft, and they're known for very experimental art styles.
Gotcha.
They
switched art styles a ton.
Yep. A very Shaft move.
Yeah. The other thing that I thought was interesting was that the backgrounds of basically every shot is almost entirely 3D, while the characters remain 2D.
Ooh, it looks so cool.
It looked really good.
I love it. Oh my god, it's like it's like RTX on the anime. Like every shot, I'm just like, wow, how did they make it this fucking good? Yeah. Which I mean, I should have done more research going before we started, because I can't remember the exact details, but I know that these 3 movies went through like a huge amount of development hell, and it took them literally like so many fucking years to actually make them because of whatever things like roadblocks. So I mean, I think their work paid off there, and I mean, I don't know how much of that time was because of just they needed to perfect the animation, or if it was other things, but one way or another, I think that whatever time they did spend on it paid off to an extreme degree, and it's gorgeous. However, going back to what you were saying before, no, I'm kidding.
Valid.
No. I love the way this overly dramatizes things, just because it's like focalized through the character's perspective, and that's like the reason for it, because it's like Araragi as a character, and in the movie, as you see through like parts 1, 2, and 3, like through the progression of things, it gets like crazier, I would say. Like as it goes, it gets more and more visually absurd. The animation gets wilder. I think it's because maybe kind of in sync with him losing his humanity, the Monogatari series, the main character for some of it, Araragi, is just like not sane. He's just like absurd, and like his entire thing is like he's a very unreliable narrator who will completely sidestep for 80 pages to just like banter. And like literally 80 pages. Like there was one novel I read. It's chronologically the one that actually comes after Kizu, and half the novel is one chapter, and it's just a chapter of him and his sisters joking around because he just gets so, because he's like, it's like him telling these stories, and he just gets so caught up in it, and it's all fucking made up pretty much. Like he embellishes so much shit. It's not all made up, but it's like it's just so wild through his whatever the fuck his brain is that like it just goes crazy. And I think that this movie like shows like the ascension of that, where it's just like absurd. And that's only one element to him. There's a lot more actual like not a human, but like there's a lot more actual like serious character pieces to him as well. But in terms of just like his style of presenting storytelling, since we are, it's the novels are first person, moral of story is just the psychoticness of the visuals very much match him. I don't know. I'm not sure if I even remotely explain that at all. But I
will say the one thing about the main character,
yes,
is that I haven't had a situation where there was a protagonist who I did not like.
What, really?
For a long time. Like, it's been a long time since we've had a protagonist that I genuinely just did not care one way or another what happened to him.
I mean, I think that's peak with Kizu Araragi, but also it's surprising that you haven't had that like
in a while.
Yeah, that's crazy.
At least to this degree.
That's fair.
Because to some degree, even with the most dislikable narrators, I still am like, aw, but I want good things to happen to you.
Yeah.
But this narrator, I just did not care about him.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't even
feel like he was very fleshed out. I didn't feel like he had any growth to him, at least in this. And you have to remember that I'm looking at this in exclusively this context, and I just didn't like him. I didn't care about him. No, I mean,
that is fair. I think it's interesting with him because he's got so many things that are irritating and frustrating just in this and even beyond. But I think what, especially for the novels, and the thing also I should mention, the anime stuff that adapts the novels after this does not adapt it in anything close to how these movies adapt it. They adapt all his monologues, and it's all like dialogue driven. Like it's very, very different. And it's kind of like they wanted to make this its own kind of experience for that reason. But I think when you kind of incorporate his monologue more into it, not just visually, but actually like his dialogue, I do think that's like not a redeemable side of him exactly, but it makes you enjoy his presence and enjoy him as a narrator until a certain point in the novel. Like there's a couple of the novels that he narrates that I cannot fucking stand, but generally I think that's what makes him work. However, just watching Kizu like on its own, 100%. I mean, Araragi is just annoying as shit. I mean, a lot of the characters are. I think that's what's also interesting about Kizu is that because it serves as a prequel to all this other stuff, it's basically like showing like the foundation of like his biggest character flaws. Like, where did these come from? Because I feel like, well, there is like the one modicum of growth where he, there's this through line throughout the movie where he's like, oh, I don't want friends because, humans, they don't do friends, because if I have friends, it means I'm going to be weak, and it's going to be, I'm going to just get hurt more and shit, edgy boy stuff. And then, of course, the movie challenges him, at every angle, where it's like every time that keeps happening, it keeps, like, the one friend he has just keeps getting, like, fucked. And then he gives up his humanity. But, but by the end, it's like, he's like, okay, yeah, no, I can have friends. That's cool. So then after that, he makes friends, So that's, like, his growth. His regression not exactly regression, but just development of this, fatal character flaw. It's just like, that's what's happening. And okay, I think to sum up everything about not like Araragi as a character and especially the conclusion of this movie, I'd say 2 words: savior complex. This movie is all about just how that was instilled into him. The people around him, Hanekawa, who enabled and reinforced that 10 times over. And it's just like each incident in the movie, it just keeps building him more and more. And that's what's interesting about seeing, it's like, Hanekawa's a couple of times like a damsel in distress. She, of course, plays into this a lot because she's got her own whole thing that I'll talk about later. But it all culminates, if you have not seen the movie, the ending of the movie kind of, and spoilers a little bit, but it's whatever. I mean, it's also a prequel, so it's basically like he's facing off against the vampire kiss shot that he's supposed to be, he's her thrall, and he's like, hey, you kill people, not good.
Because can we pause? This is one of the reasons why I really detest him, is because I don't think this boy has ever made a positive decision or thought about a decision for longer than like 3.5 seconds. Because this whole movie started because he found a trail of blood.
Yeah.
And chose to follow that trail of blood. Found her. She asked if she could suck his blood in order to regain her strength. He says yes.
But I do think it's important to know that first he runs away. Then
he doesn't actually run away. Well,
he runs away like a good bit, across to the stairs, like a good 10 meters, 20 meters, I don't know. But then it's like he hears the pathetic crying of like, oh no, I'm dying.
Right.
It's my weakness. And he's like, I need to save you.
He comes back and saves her. And then it's not until 2 hours later that he realizes that because she's a vampire, she eats people.
Yeah.
And now suddenly he has an issue with her eating people.
But I love that though. Like because it's like, you're so caught up in other things in the story that like, it never comes up like once. I kind of love that he's just so caught up in his own stupid shit and has his own idealized version of like everyone that he's like, oh, she's eating it. Like, this is the most obvious, like he should have, like, how do you not realize
not realize that that's how she
and eats? That's the big twist here. That's so cool. I love it.
Because she's like, hey, go get us a snack.
So funny.
And he comes back
to the
with
7-Eleven.
He goes to 7-Eleven and comes back and she's eating someone.
Yeah.
And he was like, what?
Yeah, I just had a mental breakdown. Which, I mean, to some degree, I mean, if you just saw someone eating a human, I mean, that trauma.
Yeah, but you also, like...
But yeah, I mean, it's like, he literally did not think about it once. But I do think, I mean, I do think watching it, you can kind of get a little sense before. But for most of the story, at least for me personally, that is not like a thought I really thought much about throughout the movie either, or the books, the novel either. I mean, like I
did.
I mean, maybe like
I was like when are they eating?
Okay, fair enough.
Like the whole time, because you remember I like leaned over to you and I was like, wait, if whenever she sucks someone's blood, they turn into her minion. Why is she only made 2? Like, she has to eat. And you were like, shut the fuck up and watch the movie.
More accurately, I was just silent for a second and I was like, let's wait for part 3.
They kept foreshadowing it.
Oh, yeah.
Because then they kept talking about, hey, do you feel hungry yet? Do you feel hungry yet? Hey, are you hungry yet?
Yeah.
And he isn't. And then I was like, what do you think is going to happen when you do?
Yeah. I don't know. It's just...
You think you're going to eat some cheese puffs and be good? You're a fucking vampire, bro.
That's the beauty of his flawed fucking brain and mindset, is that he truly limits everything he thinks of to like himself and a couple people, and he doesn't ever really allow himself. He wouldn't see the ugly truth there because it would contradict what he has in his mind. He's like idealizing. He's like, oh no, she's sweet, she's nice, she's
because not, he sees her as a child.
Exactly.
And she brings up this excellent point at the end where she talks about how he only wanted to help her when she was a child.
Yep.
When she was weak.
Yep.
And now that she's back to her full strength, Now suddenly she's the monster.
And now he's seeing the ugly truth, and he's like, oh, she actually is a powerful thing that I was ignoring this whole time.
Right.
Because he's living in his own kind of fantasy world, which, oh my God, I love that. Oh my God. It's so interesting. And it's also, I did briefly mention this to you as well, I think at some point, but visually in this, and then also in the rest of the anime, at least the ones that are from his perspective, there's no background people ever. Like, you get cars in this, and not even cars, I don't think, in the other ones, but never any other people outside of the characters that you are seeing. And the reason for that is not because they don't exist, it's because he truly does not see them. And they're not part of this story he's telling. Characters will also change positions constantly. Like at one point, towards the end of the movie, he and Oshino, the older guy, Hawaiian shirt, homie, he's like, Oshino's in the balcony talking to him, and then it just cuts, and they're continuing their conversation like in the field together. And it's because like it's all just like his brain kind of putting out this story for you.
Yes. And the other thing that I think adds to that is the fact that when he's on the verge of killing her, Hanekawa comes forward and is like, wait, like what is happening here? Like, have you thought about this? And that's when he realizes that that Kiss Shot wants him to kill her. And as soon as he realizes that that's what she wants, he refuses.
And that's, oh my God, that's like the best part of the movie is how it ends with him just literally choosing what is described to him is the way to make everyone equally miserable.
Yes.
Because he will prefer that over her just like dying, over him not being able to save a weak person. He's like, oh, she's weak now. And he actually, not only that, but like the way that the things play out is to make her as weak as she could possibly. She doesn't even really talk at the end. Like, she's just like a frail husk of a being who can barely live. And he would prefer that over letting her die because he has to be the one to save her. He has to save the weak person. It's his job.
In saving her, it would be to let her die. Like, that would be. But the issue is that she phrased it around that she was saving him, that by letting him kill her, she would be saving him, and that was too much for him to bear.
No one's saving him.
No one can save him because he's the main character in his own life, and so he needed to make everyone miserable. It is so frustrating as a viewer to watch this because there is such a clear ending. It is there is such a clear ending where everyone gets what they want. Right?
Yeah.
Except for once Hanekawa comes up and tells him that, how kind of brings a new perspective to him. Yeah. His desire, his want in that scene changes.
Flips immediately, of course.
Flips immediately.
And it's, oh my God. No, yeah, but it's in that scene, like, he looks back at her and she's just like more frail, more pathetic looking, more like just like weak and just fucking like, just pathetic really. Like, and that's what makes him be like, oh, and like, it's not that makes him, it's him hearing this information. And then he looks at her and his view of her kind of changes. And it's like, they really heighten just how like just nothing she really is right now. She's so weak. She has no life force left. She has no free will of her own at this point, really, because he's already like taken enough blood that she can't like get up and do anything. She's lost agency. And now they say this line like 4 or 5 different times at the end. Araragi, it's your choice. And it's like, it's my choice. And it's all about his choice because he has to be the one to save everyone. He is the one in doing all that. He's the one who has to take on that burden. And it's just...
But it's this burden that he puts on himself.
Yeah, exactly. And it's so fucking interesting.
I did want to talk about, you kept saying that there were so many reminders of Bram Stoker's Dracula.
Yes.
And so I'd like to hear your critical analysis.
Oh my gosh, yes. So viewers at home, I learn things in classes sometimes. I went to one of my university classes last year. I don't know which semester what. It was 2 semesters. Some amount of semesters ago. I was in a critical writing class, and the main thing we were studying from book the class was Bram Stoker's Dracula.
Bram Stoker's Dracula.
Bram Stoker's Dracula. Words are hard. Anyway, so that was like the main thing of discussion, and we literally would just like study infinitely on it. And what's interesting to me is just there's so many parallels, and the way like to Dracula and a lot of the vampiric fiction from around that time, but generally just like the way in which vampires are used, what they represent, kind of some of the allegories there, that they do have ties there. Not that they're making the same points necessarily, but I do think like symbolically it's really interesting. So to kind of explain what I'm talking about, for those of you who have not read Dracula, I think yourself included, it is just it's about sex. That's like the whole, it's very, very sexual. A lot of the time, not even overtly, but that's like every critical analysis you will read, it's like almost impossible to not touch sexuality or gender roles or something there, because that's what it is all about. And there's a couple different things. I mean, there's one thing where a lot of it's like, ooh, sexuality, it's related to morality. And that's like, he's seducing people over. And that's like a big thing where like, there's one scene when his name Jonathan, I think it's Jonathan. He gets like seduced by like 3 vampire girls, and that's like Dracula sending him after. It's like, there's that whole through line. But what I find more interesting connecting to that, Dracula is also a little, gets a little sexual, but specifically there's always a highlight on Dracula's breast. Dracula is actually usually described with more motherly qualities than fatherly. It's either motherly or childlike. Interesting. But it's a huge thing where he will like let people drink from his breast. So he'll cut his breast open and have them drink from his breast. And that's like a huge symbol because he's like this motherly figure, and he's like, I don't know. It's just like, that's a huge through line, and seeing that reflected in this, which like the first time when Araragi first gets bitten by Kishot, is in her bosom, it's a little sexual, pretty sort of sexual, yeah. But it's almost directly paralleling like that there, and they're falling. It's like kind of romantic almost, because also in like Dracula and a lot of early like vampiric fiction, it's like the act of like biting and ingesting blood and all that was sex. It was a metaphor for sex. Like when Dracula would bite someone or like suck their blood or give them his blood, it was sex. And now I'm not here to say that that Bram Stoker's like intentions with the piece were something I agree with. I mean, I think in my own personal reading of it, I think it's often very sexist in some places. Other people have had very opposite readings. They think it's super progressive, and you read it how you like. However, I think that there's a very clear parallel here with that, and especially because at the end of the movie, when he's the one sucking her blood, his severed head is back in her bosom, and he's back in that same exact position, and it's again framed in the same way of almost sexual. And this isn't a huge thematic thing, but it is just interesting to see the way that it ties back to traditional like vampire symbolism, because vampires, as they are, fundamentally vampires are about sex. You should know this is a Twilight right? I mean,
no, I totally agree, and I think that's a very interesting take on it. I think that I understand. Okay, so in between 2 movies, Caleb and I got into an actual fight.
We argued, throwing,
we were yelling at each again.
A little bit. Just a wee bit.
A wee bit.
Got a little heated.
And I think the thing is that does grant a new perspective of it. I think that, and I will agree that my views on the matter may be very biased and very stereotypical, but when I think of anime, I think of like big-chested women who are very sexualized. And I understand that not all anime, but like that was I had no frame of reference for that parallel.
That's fair.
Because according to me and my knowledge of the situation, it felt just very stereotypical of the genre to 100%. Have so much focus on breasts.
Yeah, absolutely.
And also panties. I hate the word panty. It's
I feel you there, but it's also not really a better word. It's horrible. Honestly, it's one of those words that just sucks.
I had this major issue, and with you talking about these childlike tendencies, it makes a little bit more sense.
Yeah,
but I do have overall an issue with a lot of stereotypical anime infantilizing women and making them sexual while still being childlike by highlighting their childlike tendencies in a way that is sexual. From my frame of reference, that feels very predatory and it feels problematic. So I understand more now where you were coming from in your argument. But from my frame of reference before hearing this, it felt so gross.
100%.
It felt disgusting.
And I do think that is, and I had briefly mentioned this as well, I think to some degree they are intending to go for that feeling. Because that's also, when Dracula came out, the 3 fucking vampire ladies are all looking at him sexily. That's about all they actually do. But at the time it was like, whoa, it was like hugely taboo. Like this book was like the sex book, like that for that. So it's because it's like vampires, like that was the fear in it. It's almost like how The Exorcist in the 70s. Do you know much about The Exorcist?
No.
Okay, little girl possessed by demons, fucked up shit happens. Basically the horror comes from religious fear and being like, oh my God, this is like religion or like religious trauma, things like that. It plays into that. And this is like very similar in that like a lot of the fear of vampires is supposed to come from this like taboo of like, oh, that's not right. And of course, at that time, we were very, very much more conservative than we are now as like a culture, society across the world. But now I think to some degree, they're trying to go for the uncomfortable angle a little bit there, but also we're seeing it kind of idealized through Araragi's point of view, where he's just like, oh, look at her, she's just a doll-like child and I want to protect her. And it's very weird and uncomfortable, but it's also not, it isn't, being like, oh, immediately telling you like this is immediately bad. It does eventually kind of get back around to being like that was bad, once you eventually, but it definitely, I think the cool, like something I value a lot about the Monogatari series as a whole, in this movie as well, is that it just like gives you the perspective of this character, and that's what you get. You just get this raw, heavily characterized perspective. Right. It's very, and
it's up to you to decide the reliability of the narrator, based off of your own perspective, which. He's not reliable.
No, he's the least.
There's a lot of work that the audience has to do themselves in watching this, because so much of it is it'll show you the same scene essentially multiple different times, but different things happen in the scenes. And so it's up for you as the audience to decide which one of those, if any of them, were what actually happened.
Yeah. Such a cool,
and it is cool. It is cool. It's confusing until you kind of get that that's what it's doing. Because you will like watch this whole scene play out. It's kind of like in Breaking Dawn part.
Oh my God, you're right, bro. My world has been shattered. Yo, Breaking Dawn Part 2 peak.
Which is so funny because you hate Breaking Dawn Part 2. But for those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, in Breaking Dawn Part 2, major spoiler warning for a movie that came out 20 years ago.
Oh my
whatever.
God.
20 years ago. No. 10 years ago?
Robbie Patty looking good for good. I can't speak. Robbie Patty looking good for his age is what I was trying to say.
Was it like 10 years ago? Probably. Closer to 10 years
2013,
ago.
2013, right? The last one came out?
I don't know.
So like 10 years
probably,
ago.
Yeah.
That is 10 years ago.
So in this final fight scene, you watch the whole fight scene break out. And then right when the fight is starting to conclude and you see who wins, you realize that none of it happened. It's kind of like that dream effect. It's essentially the same thing where you have to, but like kind of different.
Do it yourself.
Right. But you have to, you as the audience member get to decide what happened.
Which is, I think, and I that's one thing I appreciate about this movie especially, is they really emphasize that. The rest of it does to some degree, but not nearly the same level. And I think the reason I like that is just because that's something present in the books in a very different way, because you're not seeing anything. You're not seeing alternate things happening. You're only getting his monologuing and his rambling and his retelling of events and all this shit. And it, you just have to be like, so is this exactly what happened? Because you have to kind of like, it gives you in a different, they're both doing the same thing where it's like, you have to figure out, you're like, is this reliable? And you have to kind of take some liberty. Exactly. Yeah. And you have to just kind of let yourself be taken along for this ride, which is weird, but it's interesting. I will admit, I mean, honestly, a lot of the Monogatari novels I find very inspirational to like my own writing, just for the way in which they'll heavily characterize things with maybe an unreliable narrative, maybe a reliable narrative, but even like a reliable narrator is going to see things from a different perspective.
Right.
Like no matter what, it's the Rashomon effect. There's this old Japanese film actually that people often reference. It's called Rashomon. It's black and white, and it's basically three dudes all telling the same story, and it's in 3/3. And each story, even though it's the same story from their own perspective, it ends up completely different each time, and you have to be like, which was real?
Right.
It's that effect really, where the different characters see things so differently, and I think that's my favorite book from the entire series. From the perspective of Hanekawa, who's actually the best written character, despite how much I fucking loathe her in this movie. But that's exactly why she's the best character. But it's from her perspective, and the world feels completely different. Not just that, though, the characters feel completely different, because like the way Araragi will tell events, like his girlfriend, he portrays in a very specific way. He mostly portrays her as like sadistic and like wanting to murder him all the time. That's how he sees her. And then like from Hanekawa's point of view, she's like just like a great best friend and like super supportive and pushes Hanekawa to figure out her fucking shit. And like it's really interesting because it's like you're seeing a different side of them, but it's not just that like you're seeing it from another perspective. It's also the shift in how they're telling their stories.
Right.
And I adore that. That's something I love. Sorry,
I'm
gushing a lot.
No, that's totally, I mean, I think that there's something to be said that is there a such thing as a reliable narrator?
Yeah.
I think the most reliable narrator are books told in third person. As soon as you have a first person point of view, you lose all sense of reliable narration.
Yeah. And what's interesting, because I've one of my favorite college university courses I've ever taken is narrative theory, which heavy shit. But one of the interesting things from that was literally exactly what you're talking about. Exactly what we're talking about. But extended.
I basically took the class.
Pretty much. I mean, you're honestly an expert. Let's be real. Like on top of it, you would have aced it for sure. Like genuine. I mean, but it takes it even further, where it's like even third person narration isn't reliable. And the reason why is because third person narration is pretty much always focalized
on one character.
Exactly. You're following a character.
Okay.
Or sometimes it'll focalize on one, switch to another, but you're still there's always blind spots.
Right.
Like the only way you could really get like true clarity, objectivity is like a god speaking.
But there's no such thing.
Yeah.
Not that there's no such thing as God. I'm not willing to take a
You're like, whoa,
on that. I'm not willing to, that's
takes.
not what I'm
Yeah, that's not.
But there's no such thing as the truth. There's no such thing when you have any form of narrative. There is no such thing as the truth, because every single, like you were saying, every single person has a different perspective on the events.
Yeah. And I think like we as humans are so stuck.
We want the truth so bad. We want it to be black and white. And that's one of the interesting things about storytelling as a whole is that you can't have black and white.
Yeah, which is
which I struggle with really hard, which is why I'm a science major.
Fair.
So because I'm a biology major, and that's what I've chosen to dedicate my life to studying. One of the biggest things in biology that you learn basically from day one is that if you want clear-cut black and white, this is the answer, you are in the wrong fucking field. Because the thing with biology is that there are exceptions to literally everything. And so if you have, like, for example, let me try to think of a good one. Like, for example... Let's talk about getting back into the sexualization. Let's talk about sex, right?
Yeah.
So, according to biology, you need to have someone with two different sets of chromosomes.
Yeah.
And they can interbreed together if they're from the same species and theoretically produce a baby. If you have someone whose chromosome or genome is different enough and they're classified as a different species, they will not produce a baby, right?
Yeah.
That's pretty basic.
Yeah. General biology.
Well, then
There's exceptions.
there's exceptions. So one of those exceptions would be, for example, the liger. When a lion and a tiger breed,
right,
and then they can have a baby.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, you also have mules, or is it donkeys?
I think
it's mules.
I think.
Let me.
Because I
Google it
vaguely
real
know
quick.
what you're talking. Because I know I've heard. I heard that at some point in my life. Don't know when, but I know something like that.
Yes, so it's a mule.
It is.
So you have mules
Yeah.
who are a genetic hybrid between horses and donkeys.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have okay, fine. So you can have species that can intermix, right?
Yeah.
So let's take orcas, for example, right?
Yeah.
So orcas have, they're all one species, or are they? They have the different languages, and they're from different, essentially, cultures and pods.
Really?
So two orcas, if you take them from two different parts of the globe and put them together, they can't communicate with each other.
That's so
it's
cool.
crazy, right?
That's really interesting.
They also can't breed together.
That's super interesting.
Right. And so that's kind of what I'm saying is that even in terms of science, nothing.
There is no
black and white. There are so many exceptions to everything.
I think honestly, taking this to a larger scale, I feel like that causes all the fucking divides in the world, man.
Right.
Is that people think
we have this desire of who's right and who's wrong.
Yeah.
And I mean, you and I are both guilty of that too.
Today.
Today. And we had this conversation earlier, which is why we can't have conversation about the movie before the podcast.
Yeah. I mean, I think it worked out. We would have been.
We would have been fighting. We wouldn't have gotten to this point had we not had that.
No, we would have been a very bad vibe podcast.
Yeah,
I think it was good that we had a little discussion before.
Right.
Let it out. Made peace. Talk about Sophia the First.
We talked about Sophia the First for 30 minutes.
It's a good time.
I love Sophia the First.
Honestly. Anyway.
Because there's no sense of who's right and who's wrong. There's no clear answers. I think you're right that there's these divides that we have put between each other of, well, you can't be right because I'm right. It's
this is the way it is. This is how it is. It always is, but there's always exceptions. We need to be able to see that and operate. And that's why, in general, I think it's good to just always operate with that kind of sentiment in mind. But also, I mean, I will say that I am slightly more prone to at least being helpful with this since I am an English major, and I like being confused and not knowing definitives, and it's that's probably why I'm an English major,
right?
That's
and
why
whereas that's why I'm not.
Yeah, that's literally
yeah.
It's just a little.
I enjoy talking about it, but it's not. Which understandable, honestly. I think that's fair. I think another important thing is that with forms of media, not every piece of media there needs to be that kind of discourse. Yeah. It's present if you want it, if you want to take that deeper look at it, but I also don't want to give across this impression that after one of us watches a TV show or we watch an episode of fucking Bob's Burgers or we read a shitty contemporary romance novel that we sit there and dissect the whole thing. It's okay to watch a piece of media and just take it at face value. But that's kind of the opposite of what we do on this podcast.
No, that's fair. And I feel like for me, because I do really like to dissect things, but I do also, the way I justify it, if I'm watching something goofy or if I'm watching something I know is on objectively fucking shit, a lot of anime, I will be well, that's the point. I just leave it at that. Yeah. I think that's that's at least my trick to enjoying things at face value most of the time, because it's ultimately. Art, I avoid sounding pretentious, but art, I think defies just a required, art, just you receive it in the way you receive it. It's about the emotions that you feel. And whether you feel those emotions by breaking it down and feeling like you're understanding something deeper, connecting with something deeper, whether it's changing your life or whether it's giving you a giggle for a couple of minutes, all of that is still art. Some shitty 3-camera sitcom is still art.
Right.
It's all just human expression made to make you express.
We talked about this earlier, that like art belongs to the viewer and art belongs to the reader. And that's actually a John Green quote.
Oh, yeah.
Is that oftentimes people will ask him about mainly The Fault in Our Stars, and they'll ask him why he did something in The Fault in Our Stars or whatever. Like, what does this mean, essentially? And he always is like, well, what do you think it means? Yeah. And they'll tell him, and he's like, great, then that's what it means, because it doesn't belong to me anymore. By publishing it, and it's my gift to you. It's now yours to examine and do with as you please.
Yeah, no, I do love that. I mean, I think, and I said this before as well, but that's what a lot of people that's generally kind of how people refer to the death of the author. That's like the movement people call it. And all of my because English major, all of my classes gets brought up, and it is a very, there's nuance to it. I wouldn't say I'm 100% in agreement. My professors are all also split in various ways, but I do think I err on the more on the side of liking that. Like that's why I enjoy analyzing things. Like, that's my own YouTube channel. That's literally what I do, is I come up with my own fucking stupid ass interpretations of how this impacted me, the themes I gathered from it. I'm sure that a lot of the time when I'm interacting with media, I am seeing things in it that weren't not necessarily intended or not meant to be received in exactly the same way that I'm receiving it. But I think that art allows for that. That's part of the charm of it, is you find your own interpretations, you find your own meaning to it. And that is why I will constantly keep coming back to see things, because I just love feeling things and analyzing and thinking and emotions.
Well, and I think it's really easy. I think it's a very common like misconception that, especially as you're taking like English classes in like high school, they'll be like, the curtains were blue. That's like the meme, is the curtains are blue. What did the author intend by this?
Yeah, literally.
And it's like, well, the author intended for it to be blue. And it's like, that could be true, but what do you think about it?
Yeah.
What did that do for you? And I think that that's kind of the issue that I've been having with a lot of books that I've been reading recently, that they're doing a lot of not interesting things narratively that don't leave anything up for interpretation.
Yeah.
It's essentially just them telling me a story, which is fine and all, but I want just a little bit more.
Like, come on, give me something.
I don't want like fucking The Lighthouse, where the entire ending is up for interpretation.
Yeah.
But I also don't want to be spoon-fed.
No, yeah.
The whole story.
You know a movie you would hate?
What?
I'm thinking of ending things.
Really?
Yeah.
Me too.
that was pain. Also, I'm definitely not probably anytime soon, but someday I'm gonna make you watch that.
Okay.
Because I know you're gonna hate it.
Okay.
Because that's just like the ending of The Lighthouse for a whole movie.
Awesome.
To like 7 times extreme.
Watch me love it. Like,
that would be. I mean, honestly, you're like, bro, but. I mean, there's parts you would like. But anyway, sorry, that was just popped in my head.
One thing that I kind of want to come back to is this idea of vampires and seduction.
Yeah.
And how vampires and the lore behind vampires is a allegory for society's view about sex.
Yeah.
And I just kind of wanted to talk a little bit more about that.
Of course. Yeah. I mean, I do think it's really interesting in the fact that I feel like it's almost, it's not an essential part exactly, because I do think at this point people forego it, but a good vampire story, I think, needs to weave that into some degree. The question I'm thinking about, and I was thinking about this a little bit earlier, is I'm like, to what degree do they also have to have a take on it? That's what I'm like, I almost wonder, where I'm like, you can, weave it in and like, sort of intertwine it with what you're doing, but also it's like, do you have to make a specific take with like how you interweave it, or is it just like part of the genre? I don't know. These are the questions that were like all like flowing through my mind earlier, and I was like, I don't know.
I think that with vampires specifically, because they're so intertwined, almost to the point where they almost like vampires and seduction. I would be interested to see a story about vampires that doesn't involve some form of seduction, right? Because I almost feel like you need it in order to tell. I don't know. I guess I don't really have a point.
Fair.
I don't know.
That's just, I mean, I don't have an answer either. It's something that I do think is interesting to think about for sure.
Yeah.
Because it's just, I guess it's like probably not on like, touched territory. I'm sure there's a plethora of things that have done something like that. I haven't seen them, but I'm sure they're out there because there's everything. But I mean, it is very interesting. Something else I just find very interesting is that, with Twilight and a lot of the modern vampire things of the current era, we still do like that's still a huge element in a very different way, of course. I mean, I think a lot of the times these days it's like, vampires associated with like sad boys, or like, it's like they appeal to a certain niche there, which is interesting that they kind of move that way because it's still in line with the original like spawn of vampires being related to, sex and like having that whole subtext behind them, but almost maybe now it's like sort of it's like a sexual revolution because now we're embracing
it's that like glorifying,
which is it's so interesting
because we've moved away. Okay, maybe this is the point. I think we're getting there.
We're moving along.
We've moved from vampires always being the villains to moving to having them be protagonists and love interests and
and other things.
We've moved from having them away from just being primary antagonists to having them be love interests and their own form of protagonists. As we have kind of this sexual revolution as a society.
We're just cracking the fucking code.
Cracking the code.
We're awesome. Fist bump it. Oh my God. No, it's...
And almost when you think about it, it makes a lot more sense why Bella chose Edward instead of Jacob is because Edward is associated with sex.
Honestly, that all tracks for me. That's genius right there.
I don't think that's what Stephanie Meyer intended.
Subtext.
Yeah,
part of the, you can unconsciously write things. So for sure. Definitely out there.
But I also think it's interesting that whenever we have a vampire piece of media that involves just seeing vampires as monsters, it's almost unbelievable and disheartening. Because every time you see like a vampire go into like the kind of thing, it's kind of weird because we're so used to seeing them as more of like a Victorian stand tall seduction.
No, it's, oh my God. And, okay, just to one other thing I was going to say in response to you saying I don't think that's what Stephanie Meyer intended. And I genuinely do think, and this is like kind of brewing in my head, took a couple extra seconds to form, but I think some of what's most interesting about like analyzing that kind of culture shift is that it isn't even necessarily something that happens consciously on and off. I was joking about it being like, oh, she subconsciously wrote it. But like the way that society shifts, that these like, tropes or genres or like settings, any of these things like shift societally, that will shift in the work as well. So analyzing the work still bears value just because the writer is one part of what makes a work, but the society that influenced them is a huge other part. That's why it's often very interesting to read very, older works. Only like when you read an older work, it's like you have to know when it was written, even if it's not offensive or racist or anything. Like I think it's always you should know when it was written because I think society plays a huge role in art. I don't know, but I think the other thing I was just gonna say, just to bounce off of that, and it's slightly off of just vampires, but I think I like sexuality being expressed in art. So that's
for sure. I think that it's. They almost kind of have to go together
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, I guess you can have art that has no bearing to sexuality, but I think that the two just go together so well.
So we stand Kizumonogatari because it's my segue.
We don't stand Kizu because I hate him.
Fair. But what about Hanekawa? No,
I hate
Is it
her.
time for me to quickly say a couple things?
Yeah, of course.
All right, I've been wanting to say some stuff about her.
Okay.
Because she's honestly, I think one of the most well-written characters in my opinion, like ever that I've read, like genuinely. And I think she's the best written character in the entire series. And here is why. And this is mostly because my favorite book is, of course, the one that's from her perspective that really is the one that delves deep into this. She is a mimic, and retroactively looking back at her, it's so interesting because her whole character is that she really doesn't have a personality. She doesn't have convictions. She doesn't have opinions. She doesn't have beliefs, really, truly. She might say like, oh yeah, I do. But like, it's all bouncing off of what she needs other people to validate her for. It's all not really her own. She doesn't really have a sense of self. She just kind of adapts herself to what she can do and to get other people on her side and to kind of work her way there. And she just doesn't really understand herself. It's this big disconnect. And there's a way more. I could rant for hours. But going back to Kizu, what I think is so interesting, and I really hadn't, this is the first time I deeply was like trying to analyze. I find it so interesting that she's like actively from the get-go trying to almost form-fit herself to Araragi's like perspective and like his personality and everything about him. Like she actively is like tuning herself to him. And that's why they're the worst possible combination. Thank God that they never have any real like sexual tension or romance ever after this, because my God, they would die, which is all pretty hinted at anyway later that they would, but like still, they're the worst for each other. Like if it weren't for these two coming together, despite the fact that he made a friend that was actually ultimately gave him the key to maybe solve some stuff later down the line. She is the one who enabled and reinforced a lot of this. Not to say that it's her fault wholly or anything. No, I mean it's a lot on him. But the thing is that in these situations, she as a force wasn't the force who was like, hey, check yourself. She wasn't challenging him. She was backing him up because her whole mindset is to like form fit herself and be like, I'll do whatever. She doesn't know boundaries. Like you see in the movie, she'll like be like, oh, I'll give you my underwear, or I'll let you grope me, or like she doesn't know how to say.
She offered to have him eat her so that he would not have reservations about Kiss Mouth eating people.
Yeah. And it's not even that she like has these exact hesitations and is like just doesn't know how to express. No, it's more that she just doesn't even really understand that she has a choice. And there's a lot of stuff that stems back to her childhood. Of course, trauma originates everything. But it is interesting. And I also think throughout this movie, she is heavily suicidal. Like genuinely, she constantly is putting herself right in the middle of this and like making these stupid decisions because she clearly does not give a fuck about herself. Like even when she died, okay, another thing that happens in the movie, I'm sorry if you're trying to follow along, but it's all right. She dies briefly in the movie after getting sliced by a big old crucifix, and she's like runs out and she's like, oh, it's coming towards me. She doesn't really react. She dies, and then she comes back and she's like, damn, yo, why are you staring at me? Like she just fucking got her like organs all ripped out, like this gruesome shit. She does not give a fuck. And the novel even adds more to this, where like as I maybe I missed it in the movie as well. I might have just like gotten distracted for a second, but at least she talks to him a little bit while she's dying in the novel for a couple of lines, and even then she does not give a fuck about it. Like
because she's not saying anything about herself. She's talking to him about how he can defeat.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's all
that's what that whole thing was about. Also, what is with vampires and baseball?
Yeah, I was literally thinking that the Twilight originating everything, man. Except I guess this was written before Twilight. But no,
did Twilight get inspiration?
Stephanie Meyer's secret obsession. She was a big Monogatari fan. I mean, who's to say?
Maybe.
I mean, yeah, that was very strange. They're very good at baseball. They can just throw really. I wonder if there's like something.
There has to be, right?
Right? Yeah, no, there must be. I don't know what.
What is with vampires and baseball?
I remember seeing that. And I was like, bro, it's literally just Twilight, right? Pulling a Twilight. They were right all along.
I don't know. How old?
Oh my god. Yeah, no, it's interesting. Also, they cut one line and I was sad about it, and it was when Hanekawa backed up that suicide part even more, and I was actually very annoyed because the way cut from this discussion, it was like right before the whole stupid boob groping scene. It hurts me, even though I think
so much.
It's just like
it's just too much.
Yeah, I agree. I think even because the thing is, in the novel, it's like, so okay. And again, for context, there is a scene for like 10 minutes where she's basically just like, he's trying to touch her chest and she's like trying to make, it's like a big old mind game, basically cringe humor of his inability to touch her chest, but also like trying to be the dom, but also it's like this weird fucking shit. Right. And it it works to some degree, but also it overstays its welcome, and it just doesn't.
Yeah, it's too long.
Yeah, and just there's a lot of it, like not a lot, but anyway, I'm gonna move on from that. But anyway, before that scene actually goes down, they're still in the warehouse. She says that brief line in the movie where she's like, suicide is a sin, and then they cut away. And that annoyed me because having just read the novel this morning, actually, in preparation, that is a whole conversation, actually, that happens. Like, she says that, and then that delves into a whole thing. And the most interesting part of that conversation, where they're kind of debating the morality of suicide, is that she's like, yeah, I mean, I don't think people should, but like, also, I would happily die. She's like, I really don't want to live. I mean, I'm good not living. Like, that's fine with me. I would be fine not living.
I think another interesting thing about her character, and this just occurred to me, right?
Yeah.
Is that she is, and this is kind of what you were touching on with her having childhood trauma, is I think that she is too obsessed with other people's perception of her to the point where she's class president, she gets straight A's, so she is going to do, like you said, anything she can to not get in trouble.
Yes.
To not have anyone be mad at her. And anytime she tries to show any sort of conviction in this story and he gets mad, she immediately apologizes and backtracks everything.
Fucking spot on. So like going forward, that's so, oh my god. See, you got that's what I'm saying. Got the fucking charactering so perfect. That's exactly it. That's beautiful. Fucking immaculate. I'm proud. Thank proud you. Right now. That was great. No, literally. That's exactly it. And it's her, because it's like the perception of others is really what defines her.
Right.
That's all it is. It's all the perception, and there's no actual person underneath.
Yeah.
And that, leads to bad shit. Other weird shit happens with her. She turns into a cat that expresses her id. It's a weird thing. Lots of stuff happens there.
We have not talked about Oshino.
We have not, actually. All. Yeah.
I think that his character is very fascinating.
Yeah. Okay, expand.
And again, my only frame of reference is this set of movies,
yes,
right?
Of course.
From my perspective, we were talking earlier about how there is no form of unreliable narrator unless you have a third person perspective that is God, right?
Yeah.
To me, he reads as God.
Mm-hmm.
That's exactly what his character is. He is the true neutral of the movie.
That is interesting.
He is not good. He is not bad. He only exists, and his entire character is written to bring balance to the story. But the interesting thing about that is never expanded on. They never describe what kind of balance is bringing, what classifies as balance, what would happen if it goes off balance.
Yeah.
What is his, from a first viewing of it, his character almost seems unnecessary. But I think it's less than that. I think he's just so mysterious, and his motives are so unknown and unexplored, because our primary protagonist doesn't care about what this character's motives are, because they don't fit into, he has no reason to question them, because they're helping him. They're helping him get what he wants. And so we have this character who we know essentially nothing about. We don't know what he is. We don't know if he's human. We don't know what his powers are. We don't know how he was able to get her heart. We only know that he exists to help the main character exist in his own fantasy.
Yeah, no, and I mean, he's the one who at the end, he's like, hey, I'll give you the ability to make everything balanced. I'll make everyone miserable.
Right.
That's balance for you. Yeah. I agree 100%. It's really, He's a really interesting character, and I love, like you said. I mean, it's like D&D fucking true neutral shit, where he's just like, yeah, no, actually, I stole this heart all along. You know, who knows what his allegiances are? Oopsies. What is interesting is that in the series as a whole, he really isn't too directly expanded on. He's really interesting. Mild spoilers for the Bake Monogatari series, Monogatari as a whole. Through the original trilogy, so the first 3 novels were all called Bake Monogatari, and he is in all 3 of them as like a kind of helping hand, where basically people have different mental things. Everyone has mental illness, and that creates weird magical things. Kind of all an aftermath of this vampire shit basically fucks up this whole town. So this whole town basically turns people's mental illnesses into giant monsters. Sort of. Not exactly, but it's interesting. But Araragi, with his savior fucking ass, he finds any person, he's like, all right, I'm gonna fucking fix you up, you know? That's his whole thing. And he goes to Oshino, and Oshino's goal, he always has Oshino kind of help them, but Oshino's like, I'm not helping you, you're helping yourself, bruh, and some weird shit like that. But then Oshino, that's only for that little bit of time, and then he vanishes, he goes away, and he almost, like, he comes back once ever, pretty much, that I've read, at least in the translated ones that I've read. But what's interesting is that he's expanded on a lot indirectly by what we learn about him from other characters, and my favorite of which, one of the series' other really good characters, is Kaiki is his name. I almost forgot for a second. Kaiki. And he's basically a dark version of Oshino, where he's like the same kind, like they went to school together and they kind of both help people with aberrations, but the difference is that Kaiki is a con man who has no powers, has no nothing, and his entire thing is he just like can gaslight people into doing anything.
I mean, is that not what Oshino
exactly
does,
and that's what I was thinking about as we're watching
you were saying that like he's kind of like the opposite, but if you have a true neutral, there is nothing opposite
exactly
of that,
and I think that's what's fascinating to me. That's something I was really thinking about this time through, is it's like they try to like be like, oh yeah, this is his opposite, and it's like this, you know, black and white, but it's not. They are both the same shade of gray. It's just that, you know, depending on how you frame it. It's the perception
of the character.
Exactly.
Of the
you
main
frame
character.
it one way, it's going to be like, oh, this guy's really... If the other guy has sinister music, the and that's playing behind him, you're going to be like, oh, he's a little sus. But then Oshino, you're like, oh, he's kind of cool. But the thing is, Oshino, the whole fucking Kizu, I mean, he was just manipulating everything to go his way. Exactly. The reason that the 3 people attack Araragi at the beginning is because Oshino led them there, because he had already worked out the plan to have each of them face Araragi one by one. So he had that negotiation planned out. He had already taken her heart. He had set everything up. He set the plot of the movie in motion.
But we don't know why.
Exactly.
And I think that's why he's so fascinating.
It really is interesting.
It's because there's no answer to that.
Yeah.
We don't know anything about him.
Yeah, it's so cool. So interesting. That's what I find just interesting about the series as a whole, is just that the characters are so multi-layered, multifaceted. There's so much to explore. They're really interesting. The novels particularly, I'm a big fan of, and that's what I was. I didn't say this before, but I was going to say this. I think the one thing I have with this movie is that I feel like, for me, it's not as complete without the novel half of it, to some degree, you know, where it's like, mainly just because, I mean, we've talked about how it's like all of his monologues are portrayed visually, and I feel like a lot of the meaning there, while I think it's a good way to adapt it, it makes it so that this is worthy of being on a different format. If you're going to adapt something, make it so that you have a reason. Make it different, make it your own, interpret it your own way to make it into your own medium. But I think because all of that textual information is turned into visual information, it kind of loses a little bit there. And it's like, they kind of complement each other well. Because it's, for a long time, I've always been like, you know, I kind of like them equally, but now I'm like, I don't know how I rank the two separately together or anything, because I just feel like, I don't know, they blend together for me. And that's maybe that's just because I read it right before, and now it's like the themes from the novel are in the show, and how are they different? And that's the interesting thing about adaptation, is that when you're adapting something, it's not the author making this. This is a team of writers and animators and people interpreting the work into a visual format. This isn't the author's intent necessarily. This is other people's interpretation of his work set in a way that we can then interpret. It's like telephone with interpretation, which is really interesting, but also really weird. Anyway, that was my big ol' ramble there. But yeah.
Yeah. Quote of the movie?
Quote of the movie. I don't have a ton, actually. Actually, mainly because I have one that I already have chosen.
Okay, great.
Yeah, cool.
As Caleb knows, I did not take any notes today.
Not like a single one, yeah. Which
I took
honestly,
a page of notes because I found that every time I was trying to write notes, I can't write without looking at my notes.
Yeah.
And I was missing dialogue. So I just decided, fuck it.
Fair, honestly. Which,
So,
I mean, you know.
I don't have any quotes written down. It's
That's
whatever
all right.
you want.
Awesome. This is. I mean, I think you would agree on this because you actually literally mentioned the same quote earlier. So I think, luckily, this is perfect. And as soon as it came up, I was like, I have to. I might have a couple other that I'll mention, but these aren't at all my picks. I don't even know.
Also, I'm so sick and tired of saying the word noir. I just saw it in your notes again.
I wrote it so many times, and you're just as a bit. I would have been funny if I'd written it every time I'd come up, but I'd probably have like 18 more pages. I don't even know what most. I am a monster now. Oh, and I said that's symbolic to his final fate at the end of the movie. Because at the end of chapter, okay, I will say this. At the end of chapter 2, he has to like give away his humanity to save her, and he's like, oh, that's finally I have to give it up. And he's like, I am a monster now. It's this whole thing, and actually, I was like, wait, that actually, I mean, he is. He never becomes human again fully. Like by the end, the closest he gets is sort of close to human, but can't be considered human, but can't be considered anything else. He's just a creature, sort of like a human.
He had the option to. He just chose.
Yeah, he chose not to.
He's an asshole.
Exactly. I mean, he's the one who also self-declared that was his moment of losing his humanity. That was all self-imposed. And also, I think it's interesting to tie that back to the beginning of the movie when they started the thematic thread of him losing people he cares about, and that's why he doesn't have friends, because he constantly would say that was like a human thing. He was like, boom, that's humans will lose their friends, and I can't. It'll make me a weaker human. That's what he said specifically. He's like, that would make me a lesser human because it would make me vulnerable. And he stops being a human, and that's when he's like, oh, well, that's good now. Don't have to worry about that.
He, instead of becoming a human, gained 2 friends, and yeah.
And his strategy is just save everyone, and that's how he doesn't have to lose anyone, because if he's not human, he can't lose anyone because he takes on all the burden himself, etc. Savior complex. I wrote that a lot. I wrote Savior complex 2, Savior complex round 3, electric boogaloo. I think up to 7 different times. Oh, and I also wrote up to 7 or 8 times of Hanekawa being suicidal. I was keeping tabs of a couple of those because I thought it was funny, the consistent through line. Anyway, sorry. Yeah, I don't really care about the other. I'm just going to get to the actual note. I'm not going to lie. Okay, here we go. This is my favorite. It's different, which is Shinobu in her child form saying this to him at the very end, where she just goes briefly.
You should clarify, because you've said it a couple times. Shinobu is kiss.
Sorry. Oh my god. Kiss shot. I have been saying that's sorry. It's a force I have. That's her other name. Yeah, kiss shot. I mean to say. I apologize.
Not kiss mouth. I don't know where I
kiss
got
mouth.
that.
You know that's weird. No, sorry. Yeah, I honestly did not even realize. It's literally force of habit. Yeah, no, kiss shot in her little child form. At the end, you know, to really dig it into to fucking Araragi at the end, she goes, you would have saved anyone if they were that weak. And it bites. Oh my god. And it proves to be immediately true like 10 minutes later when she gets even weaker than she was then, and he folds that fucking bitch. Oh, so fucking, I love it. Anyway, so since that was the quote of the movie, that's going to have to play. However, it's a Japanese film. That's what I was going to say. So audio listeners, this Japanese line, that I just remember the line I just said, and that's what this is. So I, apologies, but also the line rating's still fun. So, enjoy a different language for 5.5 seconds. Video viewers, though, there will be subtitles. Play it. 弱っていれば誰でも助けたのじゃ It's been played. Okay, that was a good little time of sadness and tears and regret. Speaking of regrets, yeah. So what are you gonna rank? And you can rank it as shit as you want. It's fine. I'm not gonna even give it like the highest rankings because a lot of my feelings are for the novel. I'm realizing now. Still, again, paired with it, but I think we're rating the anime itself, the film itself. I think Anyway, sorry. Just tell me your take.
Go first.
You go first.
6.
Oh, it's not actually.
Here's the thing: before our discussion, it would have been a lot lower.
Oh yeah.
But because I am so obsessed with the discussion that we got from it and where we got with it, I think that raises the bar for me.
That's fair. I will say that was one of the things that was, especially even when we were talking, there was like a lot, especially about Dracula and stuff like that. I was like, I really want to talk, but I cannot talk, and I was like, yeah. It was hurting me a little bit because I was like, okay, how do I sort of like, defend some stuff but not actually say specific? It was real bad.
I give it a 6.
Yeah. Okay, we'll take that. Well, that's awesome. Honestly, I give it an 8.
Okay.
Yeah. So rounds down to a 7. Yeah, rounds. Middle to the 7. Yeah. That's the final score for Cynical Cinephiles. Final score 7. It's a 7 out of 10. So. Hey, we'll take it. About to be a 1 earlier, so we went from 1. Like Caitlin watching the first movie, she was for sure going for the 1.
I was in physical pain.
Yeah, no, Caitlin was like dying slowly. It was struggles.
Every time the movie ended, because again there were 3 of them.
Don't forget, never forget.
Every time a movie ended, we were watching it with my boyfriend and Caleb's roommate as well. Every time it ended, I looked around and every single one of them was looking at me just to kind of gauge the reaction on my face.
We're like, it was a little wild. I think it was good though. We took a couple, especially between 2 and 3, we took a sizable break because of an argument and then a lot of fun talking and distractions. But I think that actually worked because I think the reset gave us enough of an intermission that we were able to go in fresh. 7's a good score all around. Before I ask you what your pick is, I was going to say something. Speak my piece, It's New Year's. This is technically, not the first episode of the new year. It's the second episode. However, January's, still a thing. And I've noticed I've been re-listening to some of our older podcasts as I've been, doing my work and stuff. And I've noticed that generally neither of us are almost ever enthused at the other person's picks, and I want to make that my New Year's resolution. I'm gonna be happy about it. I don't know what you're gonna pick, and I might be shooting myself in the fucking foot, but I am apparently. It's all right, I'm more positive. I don't want to be as mean. I also feel in, a Christmas episode, I was a little negative at points. I felt bad. And I was like, okay, I want to
This
be.
This is not going to be funny to anyone else besides us. My pick and you saying this monologue is you're the only one who's going to get why that's so funny.
I'm excited, but yes, though just so you know, I'm approaching this positively. It's my new year. I want to be enthused about their shared art because we're friends, and that's where we're leading up to this. I'm glad that I chose to say this now that I know that it's apparently leading to something, even if the viewers and listeners don't get it. What's the pick? You're crying. Oh my god! What the fuck?
So funny. Sorry.
Okay. Oh, sorry. Yes. So let's hear it.
Pride and Prejudice.
I mean, I'm not opposed.
We're specifically watching the 2005 Pride and Prejudice with Keira Knightley.
Nice. I've seen like 20 minutes of that, and that's I think it. All right. I mean, yeah, I'm not opposed. I mean, I'm interested. That's genuine. I'm genuine, like truly. So I'm not angry about it. It's
for listeners. Caleb and I have had more than one discussion about how vehemently he hates Pride and Prejudice because because in every single English class he has ever taken, he has been forced to read it. And so he's so sick and fucking tired of Pride and Prejudice that he has immediately formed a bias about it because he is so sick of it. Yes. No, you can't deny it now. Now that you have this New Year's resolution, it doesn't change the conversation we have. And I have a bias
against it if I wouldn't like ever watch it of my own will, or even if you asked me to outside of the podcast. Mm-hmm. But in the frame of the podcast, I mean, Here's the thing, right?
Yeah. Is after you made me watch anime, I was like, how can I get back at him? And every option that I thought of to get back at you, I didn't think it would really give the same impact I've already made you watch all of Twilight.
I've
already, you
got me there.
So really the only option to get you back, because of how willing you are to consume media, is Pride and Prejudice.
Approaching it positively. Smiles.
I'm so excited.
I am not unexcited. I genuinely.
I love Pride and Prejudice. I love Jane Austen. I love Pride and Prejudice. Yeah. I have watched this movie. I've watched the TV series. I've read Pride and Prejudice more than once, and I was in a stage production of Pride and Prejudice.
That's a lot of Pride and Prejudice.
Pride and Prejudice.
Have you seen Pride and Prejudice and Zombies, though?
Yes.
I respect that. I almost watched that one without having actually watched regular Pride and Prejudice. No, I will say, though, even though every class of mine has studied Pride and Prejudice, never has it been the full text. So I've actually never, I don't think, unless I'm forgetting, read it like cover to cover. I've never actually fully even read it. So I've read millions of fucking passages and chapters and whatever.
You basically have read it all.
Probably, yeah. I kind of don't care enough to, one, even pay attention when I'm reading it, and I kind of bullshit it, and then two, remember. So I remember some bits, but not a lot. So this is really going to be like me reliving my boredom. But
you're looking at it positively.
I am. So I think it's going to be more interesting than The Wonder, and I am happy about that. Mm-hmm. And genuinely, I love Keira Knightley, and I'm sure that I will enjoy this to some degree. I think it'll, if I were to guess, I think I might get I'm going to start off a little bored. Maybe I'll grow attached.
You're going to want to go in, number one, with an open mind, and also you have to adapt to the language, since the language isn't how we speak today.
Yeah.
It can be a little bit difficult to understand.
I watched The Lighthouse, so. Hey, all right. Well, that's, I guess, next week's, not next week's, 2 weeks from now. I know how this system works. I came up with it. Yes, next episode that's gonna be. Music's probably playing now to signify that we're moving towards an outro, because that's what we're doing. We've been here a while.
We've been here
a long
I've
fucking
been
while.
here for 8 hours.
Yeah, we've gone through bonding. We started off. We were on the rocks.
Enemies.
Yeah, I think we're at the bottom of our relation. Now we're besties again. We've rekindled our friendship. We're about the homie squad back again.
Period.
Round 8 or round 11. This is episode 11, so round 11. Plus just our conversations before that. But who remembers life before the podcast? Anyway, audio listeners, you're awesome. We don't appreciate you enough. Video watchers, I hate you. Bye.
Bye.